Yeah.
I just moved and how terrible that is. So I'm glad that you're able to hear me, because like I all night I was sitting here trying to put everything back together. I'm like, oh God, I got to get this.
So I got to say a funny podcasting story that you'll appreciate is I just paid for the upgrade to Zoom, because I usually never have more than one other person on. So it's only when you get to 3 people that they'll cap your time and everything, right? So I upgraded it because I interviewed Max Martini, the actor, and he just directed a film, and he wanted to bring on 3 of the actors. So I'm like, oh, okay, I better upgrade, because if I'm sitting there looking at my watch and I got to stop him, it's going to look cheesy. So I upgraded Zoom, and it changed the controls slightly, and I didn't even notice it. And I checked my microphone, I checked everything else. I log on, Sam logs on, and he can't hear me. And I'm like, oh, damn it, Sam, you didn't debug your shit. And then the other guys are logging on, and I'm still kind of concentrated on Sam, and I see he's mouthing, he goes, check your email. So I check my email, and he goes, we can all hear each other, but none of us can hear you. And I went back, and there's not only is there a mute, but there's also a like turn all of the sound off, so you're not there's no nothing coming in or going out. Somehow that had gotten clicked, and I clicked that, and I'm like, okay, hey, I'm really not this stupid, I promise. Like I will hit the record button, and everything's going to go very smoothly. This is not an indicator how the rest of the show is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, technology now it's, and you know, it's funny. In your book, and we're going to talk about your book, but in your book, there's nothing about technology. It's like we gotta adapt to this technology. My kid can get on the phone on the iPhone and do things that like it takes me 10 more seconds to process, and he's already doing it. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I've been there. I've done that. I've had to spend an hour and a half once with a guest. Luckily, he really wanted to get on the show, but an hour and a half just trying to debug. So it's always great to have someone who has been there, done that, and in a variety of ways, but especially in the podcasting world. So if people don't know, Mike has his own show, and I'll talk about it on the off-air intro. But his show, Mind the Warrior, I've been listening to that for a while. Back in the day when Tim Kennedy was also your co-host. Yeah. And I did hear that interview with Max Martini, and I've loved that guy for so long. Yeah, he's so great. He's such a great guy, such a big supporter of veterans in the veteran community, and really brings a lot of reverence to when he plays those roles, because he recognizes whether he's playing a real character or a fictional character, he recognizes how it's looked at. And the 2 people that I've had the pleasure of talking, I got to interview Sean Patrick Flannery, not on my own podcast, but on the Protectors podcast. And Sean's the same way. He's like, I take a deep breath when I'm going to play the role of a veteran, of a service member, because I recognize the reverence that it deserves. So you when you watch a movie, or a TV show, you've got 2 things going for you. One, you can check on the realism of how they're portraying the military aspect of it, the tactical and the gear aspect of it. But also, you're a real doctor. You're not just Doc because that's the nickname they gave you. You are a doctor, a medical doctor, and most of the shows do it wrong. So it must be frustrating. Yeah, there's a show. I don't know if it's still on. There was a show that was called The Resident. Yes. That was absolutely horrendously awful. It was they got everything medically wrong, and then somebody on the show was like a reservist, so would go do stuff, and like everything militarily was wrong and everything medically was wrong, like combined. And I'm like, wow, like you could have hired me. I probably would have done it for, I don't know. You could have got me for $50,000. I would have served both roles, both the military advisor and the medical advisor, because I don't know who you hired now, but they're not doing a good job. Well, long time ago, and since we're going to be talking about a book about people who are over 40, so this is a long time ago. This is when I was in my 20s. I was working out in Hollywood, and a lot of times both the writers and the producers, where they get their ideas from, is just watching other movies. Yeah. So and you've been in Hollywood, you've done some stuff out there. You've been in some TV shows. So you know what it's like.
Yeah, they have a lot of third and fourth hand stuff, and like you say, their reference for what the real world is just a lot of times it's just other movies that they've seen. And they like that shot, like they like the way that scene looked or the way that story played out. So that's what they want. They want something similar. And I don't know if you saw this, but this is something that I saw working in reality television, because I pitched a lot of show ideas. And the two things that you get when you pitch a show idea is they don't want something that's absolutely new and has never been seen before, because that's dicey. And they don't want something that's been done too much. They want something that's just been done enough that there's still kind of a tide. There's still something like that. Explains all the $1 million listing shows, right? There's, all the housewives of shows, all of the, one time I think we had 4 different shows that were about people making cake. So, you can have so many of those, but when it gets to saturation point, they don't want to do that. So if you pitch them an idea, they'll either say, well, we don't know, it's never been done, or they'll say, yeah, this has been done too much. If you don't hit that sweet spot, they don't really want to take a risk on it.
You did that show a while back. If people haven't seen it, it was Hunting Hitler, mm-hmm. and great show, loved it. I had some interesting questions I want to ask you about that. But were you on any other shows besides Hunting Hitler? I did a 3-part documentary called Normandy 44 and the Battle for France that's streaming on Amazon, and it's got a lot of downloads. It's done really well on Amazon. I shot that with a company out of the UK called Bright Button Studios, and James Holland, who you saw me on screen with quite a bit in Hunting Hitler. That's all his baby. So it's based on the book that he wrote. And then I just got to tag along as the veteran to kind of give veteran perspective on as we were walking the ground, as we were on the landing sites on the beaches there in northern France, as we were walking the battlefields and the hedgerows, just to kind of give my perspective of how this reflected on my combat experience. So you're very, I would say, type A. And
probably.
Like in the intro, I mentioned that not only were you in special forces and you served in Afghanistan and you were a medic over there, and then you went to medical school, and then you became a doctor, and you have your own company and you're training and you're doing all this stuff. So that's a lot. How do you find time to get into the show business aspect of it?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of jobs. It's I go into a job, and then after a few years, I kind of get bored with it, I guess you could say, because I was an infantryman, I was an SF demo guy, engineer, an SF medic, and then I actually never deployed in GWAT on an A team as an SF guy. I only deployed as a physician, because it was actually early on in GWAT was when I got picked up to go to medical school. I was actually in the application process when 9/11 happened, but then it became a physician. That always kind of continued to be enjoyable, because I was in the unit and I was deploying and everything else, and I was actually winding down to retirement and was kind of already picking up my next thing that I enjoyed, which was working as a mixed martial arts fight physician. And I was doing that and made a lot of contacts in the MMA world here in Texas. And of course, Tim Kennedy, UFC fighter living in Texas. Tim and I had a lot of common friends, but didn't really know each other. And then we got introduced to each other and talked a little bit. I saw him. He was working as a cornerman at a couple of fights where I worked, and had a few phone conversations here and there. Interviewed him on my podcast, and we became Facebook friends along the way. And then when they were getting ready to do the second season of Hunting Hitler, Tim posts, and I'm still on active duty at the time, he posts, hey, I'm looking for either an SF guy or a SEAL with the following qualifications. And it was must speak either Spanish or German, must have these schools, blah, blah, blah. And I texted him, I said, hey, I meet all those qualifications. What are you looking for? And he said, shoot me your resume. And he passed my resume on to the production company, who passed it on to the network. And ultimately, we could do a whole show just talking about what that hiring process was like. But ultimately, what ended up happening is I got picked up to be, originally I was signed to do 3 episodes in season 2. And I was going to shoot those. I had to take leave to go to Spain and go to Morocco to shoot that. And then I came back and I started my out processing for retirement. Did my out processing for retirement. I was queued up to retire, and the production company called me and they said, the network saw the rushes from the 3 episodes you're in. They want you for 2 more. They want you and Tim together for the finale. Can you do it? And at the time, I was working for a hospital system, and I just said, hey, you guys are just going to have to do without me for 3 weeks. They weren't really happy about that, but went down and shot the last part of that, and then ultimately that led to season 3, and the whole project led to me doing the Normandy documentary as well. So it was something I kind of fell into almost by accident, you could say.
Well, you talked about you interviewed Max Martini. You also, I think, can't remember the name, Sam something, the
Sam
director
Hargraves.
of Extract. Yes.
Yeah.
Great movie, Extraction.
Yeah, amazing movie.
And Chili Palmer helping out doing the tech work there.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have that nexus over into the show's business side of this world. I know that you have your own company and you are a physician. Do you still want to go and participate in that? Is that something where you want to see yourself going? I
do. I actually want to do. I had I wrote a treatment for a docu-reality show that would be centered around me that was called ER Afar. And I posted a trailer on my social media. A lot of people have seen it, and it got a lot of traction. We had a production company that signed on. I was going to be an executive producer, as was BJ Golnick, who directed everything and was my co-conspirator, as it were, and kind of coming up with how to flesh out that idea. It basically would involve me traveling around the world, going to places like this southern Israel or Mount Everest or Cape Town, South Africa, and working in an emergency room for 24 hours, seeing all the crazy stuff that they see, whether it's people getting hit with kite bombs in Israel, shark attacks in Cape Town, knife attacks in Rio de Janeiro, frostbite on the base camp at Mount Everest. And I just thought that would be a real interesting show to show people how different medicine is throughout the world and how medical emergencies are different. The whole idea actually came from something my wife said on our trip to London. She said, wouldn't it be cool if you could just work in ERs all over the world? And I said, that'd be cool to do. I said, that'd be a cool TV show. And that's kind of where it came from. That idea got a lot of traction. A lot of production companies were interested in it. Never got any networks hot on it. So I'm still open to doing that project. It's still something I'd be open to do, but I really want to do scripted stuff. I've been writing short stories, everything from war stories to science fiction ever since I was a kid. And I have a concept that I'm working on with BJ Golnick that we've been working on for, I think, 4 years now, and we just never find the time to finish. But it's basically about a serial killer in Vietnam in 1968. So that's an idea that we'd like to do, and I would love to work on both sides of the camera. When I did Hunting Hitler and when I did Normandy 44, I was really keen on watching what directors do, what the director of photography does, what the cameramen are saying to one another, talking to the sound man about how he does his job. All of that just really interested me. The only part that I really haven't got to see is the editing process, which I'm hoping if I do another project in the future, I'll get a chance to really sit down and watch the editing process. So I love telling stories, and I love reading good stories. I love watching good stories, and I love telling good stories. And it's I've got a lot of crazy stories that I've made up in my head. I wrote a few years back. This isn't on my resume because it doesn't get mentioned. I wrote a comic book, and I can't draw, so I had to have somebody else do the illustrations. But I wrote and published my own comic book. And you can find it on Comixology. It was supposed to end up being an entire graphic novel set, which is too expensive for me to do right out of the gate. So I wrote the first issue, and then I was going to go on from there. And it was so incredibly painstaking and time consuming that I wasn't able to do that because other projects kept popping up. But that whole idea, that whole story arc is still in my head. So maybe someday I'll go back and finish that.
So in your new book, it's called Honed, mm-hmm. which is a very interesting title. It starts off with you doing a tour or doing, I don't know how you call it. It wasn't really a tour in Afghanistan.
Yeah, it was a combat operation.
It was an operation. I was going to say
yeah.
a mission operation in Afghanistan at the ripe old age of 48.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Correct. So
that in itself is a great story. And I'm sure you could have gone more into detail in the introduction with that. But to get to that point where you're going to Afghanistan at 48 years old, did you come from a military family?
I didn't. My father served in the Navy. His father served in the Navy, but it was my father was in the Navy in the late 50s. So he came from a family where you can either go do a couple years in one of the services or you can wait around and get drafted. My grandfather, of course, was in World War II in the Navy, and then my dad was quasi peacetime. He was actually early days of Vietnam, so he was on the Bennington when they were dropping off SEAL teams into the Mekong Delta in the early days of the Vietnam conflict. No one in my family had ever been career military, so that was certainly a stretch.
Did you grow up in Texas or did you grow up somewhere else?
No, I grew up in Southern California. I was born in Redondo Beach, and I spent my formative years in a little town called Tehachapi up in the mountains. Working class background, going out shooting rabbits and coyotes with my .22 rifle, and getting four-wheel drives stuck and driving around in a junky '66 El Camino and trying to keep that running with a case of transmission fluid behind the driver's seat. Pretty standard 1980s teenage upbringing, I guess you could say.
Yes. No, we're roughly the same age, so I totally get that picture. So what made you want to go into the military?
Around the time I was in middle school, I was really looking for something that was going to challenge me, something that I could just look towards being a part of something larger than myself. And you get a little bit of a taste in that in organized athletics, and being part of a team, and feeling what that feels like to achieve victory as part of, again, as an integral part of something that's larger than yourself. And that kind of combined with this newfound love of the outdoors. I loved camping, I loved shooting, hunting, fishing. And by the time I hit high school and the Army recruiter was coming around telling me about things like airborne rangers and Green Berets, I was like, wow, that sounds really challenging. And they tell you things like, yeah, less than 10% of people can even make it. And you do that, you'll know. You'll look in the mirror every day knowing that you are a cut above. And I'm like, I aspire to do something like that. And I'm not incredibly athletic. I'm 5'6". I'm probably smarter than I am strong, and I'm not all that smart. But I was never I was one of those guys who in middle school, when you're put on Pop Warner type teams by weight and size, I did really good. And then as we moved into high school and it became more evident that I was smaller than all of my peers, I wasn't first string anymore. And so I was pretty much second string. I was a second string linebacker and center through all of my high school career. And again, I was only 5'6", not incredibly fast, never going to be a long distance runner with my stubby legs. And I think there were a lot of people when I was telling people I'm gonna go be an airborne ranger, I think a lot of people in my high school were like, yeah, he won't make it. He'll wash out. So, but I had a lot of drive, and I wanted to do something that was special. I wanted to do something that not everybody does, and I wanted to serve my country. I was, I had I don't know, we weren't a big flag waving household. I mean, my father served, my grandfather on both sides served. And my parents were law-abiding citizens, but we didn't beat a big patriotic drum in my household. But at some point, I started to really feel that, and I think I tell people that I was a Reagan Ranger, because that's that was a time in the '80s where being a patriot became a cool thing again. It was like, it was cool to be proud to be an American again. And it was cool to go and serve. And you saw a lot of that in the mid 1980s. There were a lot of guys who, you know, the stereotypical, oh, everybody that serves in the military is from lower income and they don't have a lot going on. They're not going to get into college. And that totally was not, and is still not the case, but you really saw that in the 1980s. Coming out of the draftee army of the 70s, it was cool to serve. So people that came from, you know, middle class, you know, working but middle class families who had opportunities and offers to go to college, but said, you know what, I want to take 4 years and I want to just go do something that's just totally different that nobody in my family's ever done. And I'll always have that. No, you know, I might go get a business degree. I might go work on Wall Street. I might be a teacher or a football coach, but I'll always have that beret on my mantle. I'll always have that plaque. You know, I'll always have the Bowie knife that my squad gave me when I left, because for 4 years I jumped out of airplanes and walked through the swamp in the middle of the night and I did cool stuff. And that's kind of the military generation that I was in.
And so when you went in, they didn't have a track back then to get you right into SF, did they?
So they did. The year before that I signed up for a year of delayed entry. And a close friend of mine, Brian Edwards, who ultimately did more years of service than I did, and he retired as the Command Sergeant Major of Special Forces Command. Brian and I were close friends growing up, and he was a year older than I was. When he went and signed on the dotted line, he got a Special Forces contract. So he was basic training, airborne school, ship you right to Fort Bragg, and you're in the pipeline to do, back then they had pre-phase, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So he went that route. And when I went to go, about the same time he shipped off, I went to go sign in for delayed entry, and there were no options for that. They said that they had very, very limited numbers, like maybe one a month per reception station. And they said, how about a Ranger contract? And I'm like, I've heard great things about the Rangers as well. I would love to do that. So, and of course the recruiter's always telling you, hey, and once you get there, you can just volunteer for SF and you'll probably get accepted right away, right? Which isn't 100% true, but it didn't matter. In retrospect, that was the right fit for me, because as an 18-year-old who needed to do some maturing and needed to really learn how to be a basic soldier in a more regimented context prior to going to SF, which is, you know, a little bit more all about internal motivation and big boy rules. I'm really glad I did it the way that I did. I'm glad it was the absolute best thing for me, was to do 4 years in Ranger Battalion as the start, as the foundation for the rest of my 32-year military career. So
you went into SF, and you said you were a demolitions guy?
When I did go to SF, because I got out, when I got out of the Rangers, I went ahead and ETS'd. I went into the National Guard. I went into one of the National Guard SF units, 20th Group out of Florida, actually. So initially we were out, my company was at Blanding and then moved to Ocala. Yep. So I know you know where both of those places are. We got mobilized for Desert Storm. Didn't go across the water, didn't ship over. We went to Fort Bragg and ended up doing some other stuff. But that was when I got put into the training pipeline. So that's when I did Special Forces Assessment and Selection, went right into the Q course as a demolitions guy, as an engineer, and then did language school afterwards. So my first 4-ish years on an ODA were as a demo guy.
So when did you make the transition from that into, were you ever is it an 18 Delta?
Yeah, I was an 18 Delta. So what ended up happening? Which is the medic? That's the SF medic, MOS. After I'd been on a team for a little while, I had thought about it for a while. I had the utmost respect for the medics, and I really appreciated that they were really at a higher level. That it was really evident that the course that they went through, there was no do-overs. There was no bluffing your way through that. Not to say there is with any of the other Special Forces MOSs, but everybody on a team looks to the medics as, hands down, those are the guys that academically had a much rougher go of it than the rest of us. They have a higher attrition rate. Those are the cut above. Those are the smartest guys on the team. And I don't think in public people might disagree with me, but in private, any SF guy will go, okay, yeah, that's true. So I had thought about it for a long time because I wanted the mental challenge. And then the linchpin that kind of made me do it was I was going through some personal issues that geographically had a little bit to do with the Fort Bragg and Fayetteville area and me not wanting to be there. And I was looking at a couple different options to just I just need to get away from this place. I need to not be near this installation, not be near some of the people that are here for a while. And I didn't get into any trouble or anything like that. But so that's when I said, hey, the medic course at the time was in Fort Sam Houston, Texas. Now's as good a time as any. I'll go do that. So I did. And I was actually in the medic course. I was enjoying the mental challenge aspect of it. But then all of a sudden I realized during the course, I really do want to take care of people. I really do want to help people that are hurting. I want to take care of patients. I looked at this completely as an exercise in problem solving before I got here. But now that I see the human component of it, I really like that. And that was when I made a decision that no matter what I did for the rest of my career, it was going to be something that had to do with medicine. I wasn't going to be a Special Forces warrant officer. I was never going to be a company sergeant major. I was going to either be a PA or I was going to be a physician, because caring for patients and doing so in uniform, being even more important to me, was going to be my focus.
So how were you ever deployed as an 8 Delta?
I was not deployed in the sense that most people think of it now in the global war on terror. So I did multiple trips. I was heavily involved in counter-narcotics and the drug war. A lot of trips to Colombia, a couple of trips to Peru, a lot of trips to Bolivia. So pretty much I've been to all of the Andean Ridge countries. I've been the guy on the radio when narcotics planes are getting intercepted and interdicted. I've worked with every 3-letter agency that has either a main focus of counter-narcotics or has a counter-narcotics division. I have worked with, in the jungle somewhere, on an airfield somewhere. I've done all that. In fact, I was in Larandia, Colombia, which is heavy narco territory when 9/11 occurred. So that was my focus. And it's funny that you say, have you deployed? Because people would ask me when I was in medical school, they're like, oh, your prior service, have you deployed? And and I'm like, oh yeah. They said, oh, how many deployments do you have? I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know, like 8 or 10. And they're like, what? Because this is early 2000s. And they're like, where did you deploy? And I go, oh, Colombia, Bolivia, Peru. And they're like, oh no, that's not what I meant. And I'm like, oh, I got combat pay for all of those, and guys were trying to kill us, and we were trying to kill them. So I count them as deployments.
Right. Oh, of course. Anytime. It's a mission's a mission.
Yeah.
So when did you? So they sent you to medical school? Is that what I read correctly?
I decided that I wanted to go to medical school. And this was.
Did you already have college?
I didn't. I finished my undergraduate. I got a little bit of college during the time period that I got out after I got out of the Rangers, but not enough. So I started going to night school out of Fort Bragg, and went to night school. Luckily, I got transferred to company headquarters. I was on the company, what they call the B team, for 8 months. So that helped. That was a couple of semesters that really helped me out with. And I ended up doing 3 years of college in a year and a half, going to night school. Graduated from Campbell University summa cum laude, or summa cum laude, however, depending on who you're talking to. And I started my application process for medical school, knowing that I wanted to go primarily to the Uniformed Services University, which is ultimately where I went, which is the DoD medical school. So it's a tri-service. Actually, it's quad service. So you have Army, Navy. Of course, the Marine Corps doesn't have its own physicians. They're all Navy. Air Force, but also public health service as well. So
which we saw a lot of during the pressers with Trump.
Yeah. So that's public health service. Public health service has a huge mission. Basically, all of the Indian Health Service hospitals and all the Indian reservations. So those are all PHS. But PHS is, when it comes to like disaster response, pandemic response, the Surgeon General of the United States is we call them Admiral. He's a public health service admiral. Their uniforms look exactly like the Navy. Public health service are really they're kind of unsung heroes in a lot of ways. I mean, they have been doing the heavy lifting when it comes to a lot of underserved areas of medicine and a lot of disaster response here in the United States, really forever.
And your specialty is emergency medicine.
That's correct. I went to emergency medicine.
Which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's, I don't, much like I've had a lot of jobs, and I kind of shift from job to job, and I get distracted by shiny objects. The idea of going into the same office every day and seeing people for blood pressure medication and blood sugar checks and telling them to watch their cholesterol, that was never going to be what I wanted. And plus, the big thing is the whole reason I went to medical school is, well, how do I get back to the special operations community and give them what they need? And what they need is high-level trauma care at the point of injury, at the tip of the spear. So emergency medicine is going to be the way to do that.
I have a friend who's also an orthopedist. He was attached, I don't know, we haven't really talked about it that much, but he was with an SF unit as a physician, but he's an orthopedist, and he was taking off legs and doing whatever he had to do there, and got really, unfortunately, really good at that, but neither here nor there. So yeah, I didn't know, I did a course with, are you familiar with Mike Pannone?
I know that name.
He was in the unit, and he was with Kyle Lamb at the time.
Okay.
So you get a frame of reference what time frame we're looking at. But he also now he teaches obviously firearms courses and whatnot. But he did a course. I did a course with him that he brought an 18 Delta with, and it was a whole TCCC type course. Mm-hmm. But the thing that blew my mind is that he was telling us that they did rotations with different mass casualty hospitals where we talk mass casualties, talk about places in Boston and New York and Chicago where they're just dealing with gunshot wounds all the time, or bad car wrecks, and like even the physicians were impressed at how well they were able to do their job and to treat people and to sew people up and deal with the crisis of someone dying right there in front of you.
Yeah, that's when I went through 18 Delta training. I got a little extra taste of it because in my class, one of the guys in my class figured out a way that we could moonlight on weekends and work in the at the time it was still called Brooke Army Medical Center, the old Brooke Army Medical Center, ER, which was for that area of town was the level 1 trauma center. So we would go in on a Saturday night and work a Saturday night and just doing the basic scut work type stuff, helping transport patients to CT, starting IVs. But we got to be involved in the traumas when we came in, and exposing the patient, cutting all their clothes off, starting the IV, putting in the Foley, helping stabilize C-spine to get them in a C-collar, get their imaging and all that stuff. So that was my first exposure to seeing really people that were coming in shot. And what the priorities are and how you treat them. And then didn't see a whole lot of trauma when I did what was called my clinical proficiency training, which was in Gallup, New Mexico on the Indian Reservation Hospital there. But certainly a lot of orthopedic stuff, a lot of rodeo injuries and things of that nature, and a lot of good medical cases. Went to paramedic school in San Antonio. The Army sent me back to Texas to get my paramedic certification. So got to see the pre-hospital side of it there. But in between, I had my first exposure because really I was pretty fresh. I was still not even a year out of the SF medic course. And I was in Chimare, Bolivia. And that was when the Cocalero uprising of 97 occurred. And they were ambushing the Bolivian National Police, and they would take rocks and tape them to sticks of dynamite and throw them out of trees and throw them from covered positions. And there's people don't realize this, but there are Mauser rifles all over Bolivia that Che Guevara actually brought over. And they've been in these caches like everywhere. So every once in a while they some of them pop up again, and the people that want to grow cocaine start shooting at cops and shooting at the Army with them. So I was there for that, and we had just basically an entire week of of gunshot wounds, coming in front of us, like on a constant basis, unloading medevacs and stabilizing people, and then putting them on fixed wing aircraft and getting them to definitive care at a surgeon and in the cities nearby. So that was my first real exposure to combat trauma and being the kind of the supreme medical authority on the ground. Like not, I'm going to do this, but somebody's looking over my shoulder to tell me that I'm doing it right. So that was definitely.
So you're your own attending.
Yeah, I was everything. So it was me and another SF medic who did have more experience than I did. And I was always quick to look at him, if I didn't know. And he'd just give me a thumbs up, like, you got this, man, go ahead. And it was an interesting time. So it was definitely a baptism of fire. Interesting story. So Evo Morales, who ultimately became the president of Bolivia, Evo actually tried to have me and the other SF medic killed while we were there because he didn't like that we were getting good publicity for the Bolivian National Police and for the Drug Enforcement Administration, because we were taking care of not just police and soldiers, we were taking care of civilians as well. So that was good PR, and he didn't like that, so he wanted to have us killed.
With everything that you have going on, how are you still on rotation at a hospital doing emergency medicine?
So I'm a locums physician now, which means I don't have any one particular hospital where I work. Locums means you work for like an agency, and then hospitals contact these agencies and they say, hey, we need a couple of shifts in July, we need a couple of shifts in August. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, during COVID, the locum shifts essentially just completely dried up because volumes, although hospitals are full, emergency room volumes are actually way, way down because people are aware. People don't want to go, right? They're completely aware that, hey, that's where all the COVID patients are going. So I've often said this is the first time in probably the last 20 years that people are actually going to the emergency room for legit emergencies, not all the bullshit that we normally see that's not an emergency. So that's kind of a good thing, I guess. But it's, I went from working typically, a couple of shifts a month to basically nothing for the latter half of 2020, and I haven't worked an ER shift in 2021 at all. But I'm a SWAT physician with a local SWAT and with one of the regional SRTs for the state. Okay,
so do you still have to get your CME credits and get credentialed in different hospitals?
So I still have to do CME. So I just redid my board certification. I've been board certified just over 10 years, and 10 years is when you have to redo it. So I just redid it. I have to submit my CME credits, which I'm doing CME all the time anyway. I am a global clinical advisor for a company called Safeguard Medical. Previously, I was medical director for a company called Persis Medical, which your listeners might be familiar with those names. So it's tourniquets, chest seals, IFACs, all kinds of pre-hospital and hospital supply stuff. So I've worked for both those companies. And in my role with both of those companies, I have to do a lot of research. I'm always vetting, safety of products and efficacy of products. So I'm constantly reading articles, talking to people about doing research, getting involved in research. I had a research publication on TXA last year. So I'm always logging all of my CME, so I don't have any problem at all kind of keeping that up. And then I have a folder on my MacBook where I keep it saved, and then when the Board of Emergency Medicine asks me for it, I send them proof of those credits.
So let's switch gears, because I know people want to hear about your book, and I really enjoyed so far. I haven't finished it, but there's a couple books that I've read in my life that I felt like they were written for me. Mm-hmm. So one of those books was With Winning in Mind by Lanny Basham, who is out in your neck of the woods in Texas, but he's a mental performance coach. And, same thing. He's never in his growing up, anyone think anything of him. Mm-hmm. In fact, in class, they were saying that he would be the least person to make a gold medal in the Olympics. But he went on to win world championships and win the gold medal in air rifle. And
Very cool.
So it was such a good book, but like everything he was saying sounded like it was written for me. So I was having my own issues. So Honed is kind of the same thing because I'm of that age, and a lot of the stuff that I started to discover on my own were some of the same principles that you were talking about in that book. Especially when it came to fitness and dieting, and one of the things that just we were just doing our qualifications at my agency. And so I see a lot of people. And so I met this guy and I was talking with him because, as we get older, one of the things that goes is our vision.
Sure.
Right? So people have a hard time seeing things. And when they correct your vision, they're correcting for distance vision. They're not correcting for that intermediate area where front sights tend to hang out.
Yep.
So they have a hard time seeing that front sight.
That's why I went to a red dot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I always stress that. But I said to him, you look, I didn't say you look really old, but he looked really old to me. He looked like he was in his 60s. And I said, so how old are you? And he told me, he gave me his age. It was like 2 years older than me.
Yeah.
And he looked ragged.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe he had some horrible disease. I don't know. But he's still working, so obviously it couldn't have been that horrible. But he just looked, some people just look old. And,
Yeah.
there's some people I come across, and I'm older than them. And they just look older than me. And so a lot of that, I think, has to come to the fact that I did make a decision that I'm going to start eating well. I did make that decision that I'm going to maintain my fitness and do martial arts. So first of all, the name Honed, where did that come from?
So I had a lot of really crappy title ideas in mind for the book.
Of course.
No, they're all way too wordy and very clunky. None of them made sense. And I published with a company. It was funny. I was on the Alert podcast yesterday, and I was just telling the same story. So I wish I could say, it was this bolt of lightning that I was sharpening my machete, and I thought of as an allegory for an aging man. It's nothing as cool as that. It was. They actually had me do a phone call with somebody who kind of specializes in that, in coming up with titles and knowing what titles need to sound like. And
I just want to ask real quick, what were some of the titles that they gave you before you got to Hone? Not your titles, but the stuff they were coming up with.
It was like tempered, like it was all because so what I found out is the one word title with the subtitle is the holy grail of titles. Okay. So because originally I had titles like Greybeard Performance, talking about, and they're like, no, too wordy, or staying fit after 40, you don't want, that's too self-explanatory, it doesn't catch you, right? And they're like, you want the one word title with the subtitle, that's like the holy grail. So we're talking back and forth, and tempered is the only one that I really remembered. But she said, you want it to be something that show, and I'm like, we were forged. I think we said that one at some point. And it's like, no, forged is that's too new. That's what happens. You're fresh out of the forge. That's not, somebody. And we're like, we don't, seasoned sounds too much like food. And it's like, what are we going? And she's like, okay. She says, well, let's talk about. And I talked about my whole approach, the warrior athlete thing, and that your body is the weapon. And she goes, okay, the body is the weapon. Body is the weapon. How about, and she was, we weren't on video at the time. I'm guessing she, had some dictionary stuff open, and she said, honed. What do you think of honed? And I'm like, I like that, honed. She's like, okay, the subtitle. And then she was firing out subtitle ideas, and they were all very, very clunky. And I said, no, I got it. I said, finding your edge as a man over 40. And she goes, oh, perfect. That's it. So we locked it in. So, and that was the title. And then, I liked it, but I didn't love it until I saw the artwork for the cover and those grimy hands with the knife and the sharpening stone. I'm like, now I love it. Now I love that title because that speaks to me.
Why write the book in the first place?
So the book was a compilation of a lot of questions. Like you said, you mentioned that these are some things that you've already figured out on your own. For me, it was a lot of that. It was, and I talk about in the book that I had this journey where it was like, there weren't answers. There were answers for the 20-year-old athlete who wanted to go to the Olympics, right? There's an answer for that guy. There's an answer for the 25-year-old who wants to go in and be a mixed martial arts champion. There's an answer for the person that wants to be an Olympic powerlifter. There's answers for all of those people, or a bodybuilder. But if you look for answers over the age of 40, the answers you get are drink your prune juice and go on a 20-minute walk 3 times a week and don't hurt yourself. Lift with the legs, not your back, so you don't hurt yourself. And that's pretty much the answer. And I'm like, I don't want to live like those. I don't want to just not get winded walking from the golf cart to the tee box. I want to go out and do some type of extreme challenge, where, I'm pushing the wheel of pain with Wes Whitlock, or I'm doing a farmer's carry for time, or I'm dragging a 150-pound mannequin for time. I want to do those type of things. And I want to do operator type stuff. How do I do that? And the answers weren't out there. So I had to kind of figure that out on my own. And a lot of it was trial and error. And then talking to people, talking to physical therapists, talking to personal trainers and coaches and nutritionists and people that had done the deep dive when it comes to things like supplements. And I mentioned 2 of them in the acknowledgments of the book. PJ Brownell, who is my fitness coach at OPEX Round Rock, was instrumental in really teaching me why things worked the way they did when it came to fitness. And Drew Wingy, who was one of my colleagues in residency, who is just an absolute expert in health, fitness, nutrition, supplementation, and testosterone replacement, hormone replacement. And, me, when I first started to figure out what I felt I needed to take as supplements, and I would do the research, and if it was definitive, I would add that to my supplementation. If it wasn't definitive, I would go to Drew. And I would say, what do you think about this? He said, nope, your assessment is correct. The jury's still out. We need to wait. It's not worth adding until we really know one way or another. So piecing all this together over time, and then with the podcast, I started to get emails. And the emails were always, hey, doc, I'm right around your age. What kind of diet should I have? I've been told this. I've been told that. What do you think of keto? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Hey, doc, what do you think of turmeric? Hey, doc, I have 2 slip discs, and I hate that term because they're not slipped, they're herniated. I have 2 slip discs in my back. Is it okay for me to do jiu-jitsu? Is it okay for me to still be lifting? Hey, I got bad knees. Can I still do squats? All of the same questions. And I was always answering them. And I was always saying to myself, it'd be really great if I just said, here's a link. All your questions are answered. And then it dawned on me, here's a book. All your questions are answered. And I'd answered that in my own mind multiple times. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with the publisher when he said, well, what do you want to write a book about? Because I actually had been I'm halfway completed on a completely separate book that I still haven't published. And he's like, I don't think that's, given where you are in your life right now, I don't think that's the book for you. What else you got? And he said, this is where I see you going in your life. And I'm like, well, yeah, I've kind of already, between my podcast and the email I've answered, I've almost written that book already. And he goes, well, then write that book. And so that's the book that I wrote.
How long did it take you to write?
It didn't, I think nose to the grindstone, 4 months. Yeah, 4 months during COVID. Maybe a little bit less than that. And then another 2 months of editing when they sent it back for edits. So
when we're talking about age, I'm just curious, do you feel your age?
I feel it. I don't let it hold me back. I mean, I definitely, I was in the gym this morning, and for the first time, I mentioned to my wife, and I went to the gym together this morning. And I mentioned to her that today was the first time since I was in my 30s that I did dumbbell presses with 70-pound dumbbells. I did 8 reps. And I did 60, 65, 70. I did 3 sets, and I added weight each time. But the last set, I did 70 pounds in each hand. And I said, this is the first time since my 30s that I've done that. That was my workout weight in my 30s. Now, of course, in my 30s, this is when I weighed 145 pounds when I was doing it, and I weigh 170 pounds now. So it's probably not as much of a feat, right? But I feel the difference. But I don't feel at all like I thought a 55-year-old man would feel. And I certainly don't think I feel the way society says a 55-year-old man should feel. I mean, I'm only 5 years shy of 60. A little less than that, right? Because we're through this year a good bit. So I'm 4 years and some change on the down slope of 60. And I'm in the gym 6 days a week. I'm on the jiu-jitsu mat a minimum of 2 days a week. I try to go for 3, and I try to get in some MMA too, and I'm hitting the heavy bag, and I'm doing active recovery, and I'm mountain biking, and I'm in full kit 12 hours a day with the SWAT team doing whatever they're doing, whether we're doing training or actually out doing real stuff, and at the range all day and slinging lead down range. And if you would have told me when I was 25 that I'd still be doing this at 55, I probably wouldn't have believed you. And I certainly don't think, I think if you draw out the bell curve of what most people are doing at 55, I think I'm definitely on the tail, not in the middle of that.
Yeah, that when people ask me, or somehow comes a conversation my age, and then I tell them that they're very, very surprised. And I'm like, I never, when I was, like we're talking, like I was even in my 20s, and you think about what, being in the 50s is like. Mm-hmm. To me, that was like someone's already had a career, they're done, they're pretty old, and, they don't do much anymore. Mm-hmm. They got their grandkids and whatnot. And just mentally, I don't even think like that. I don't, now feeling, if you want to feel like body response feeling, my recovery is a lot harder now. Or when I wake up in the morning, I definitely feel mm-hmm. everything that's ever been wrong, I feel, and, but, knock wood, other things have been, good. I don't know if I should say it, but it's been good, because again, eating right, I think has just been one of the more important things. I guess what you put into your body is just so important.
Monumentally important. Yeah.
And it just gets me, like, I looked at my mom as how she got older, and my dad, and he got older, and how the doctors would treat him with a medication, mm-hmm. to fix cholesterol or other things. And it's just horrible drugs. And I just never wanted to be that person. I never wanted to have to take a drug to eat bad. Yeah. Like, oh, so now I can go have a cheeseburger. I'm like, no. Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. And you do talk about that in your book. You do talk about the diet and nutrition.
Yeah. And I call out the medical community in the ways we've failed. That I'm still waiting to take some heat for that. I've gotten really good feedback from people not in medicine. I've gotten some positive feedback from some people in medicine who have been saying that. But it's diet. There's so much you can control with diet and lifestyle, and you don't need medications. If you eat right and you exercise and you do some pretty simple things, you can avoid, and all of the things that guys our age group have been told are normal. Oh, you're going to get high blood pressure. You're going to be on a high blood pressure medicine, and you're going to be on a cholesterol medication, and you're going to be on something for your pesky prostate, right? And we're going to warn you about your blood sugar, right? Because that's going to be creeping up. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and maybe we might have to tell you to do something about that. No, these things are all controllable by lifestyle. I'm on, and full disclosure, and I don't hide this from anybody. I'm on testosterone replacement, and that helps with a lot of the other stuff. Certainly it does. But because of that, I can do a lot of these things. But I'm not on a blood pressure medicine. My blood pressure and my blood sugar are pristine. My cholesterol is on the upper end of where they want to see it, but not crossing over into the dangerous end, because I watch what I eat. And part of that, this is a whole separate conversation. Part of that is because I'm on TRT, because my body's not using the cholesterol I ingest to make testosterone. So it makes it even a little bit harder. But I do my due diligence, and so I keep myself out of the danger zone. And people need to realize that these are things you can control with lifestyle modification, and you don't need to be on medications to do it.
you open, like I said before, with you doing your very last operation in Afghanistan. I'd be remiss not to bring up what's going on now in Afghanistan, or what went down last week.
Yeah.
From your perspective, and one of the things, I've always done on the show, I bring on people to get perspective on things. Bring on historians or other journalists to just give perspective so people get an understanding. And like I said, I was on hiatus as I was moving. Studio was shut down. You're the first person back, and we just had this evacuation, this ordeal that went down in Afghanistan. And I got into law enforcement because of 9/11. I was in New York, and that was one of the things. And frankly, I just can't see the upside to any of this. So just from your perspective, what do you think about what happened?
Yeah, it's been challenging to watch, and I did an episode of my podcast talking about it specifically and kind of my thoughts on it. But first and foremost, I want to say to everybody who served, this is number one. We were victorious in every battle on the battlefield, so we won this war 100%. The fact that the politicians chose to throw that away is not a reflection on us. Not a reflection on us as a fighting force. We won. We kicked their ass. There's not even debating, that this was 100% a military victory. And we did do a lot of good. And for 20 years, have there been terrorist attacks? Yes. Have there been terrorist attacks on American soil? Yes. But are you shaking your head? No. So here's why I'm saying it, because I said that and I got called out. So, but let's look at what they were. Boston bombers, okay? San Bernardino.
In Texas?
Yeah,
You had something
Texas.
in Texas.
So these are all some even say they're radicalized lone wolves. And
we had Orlando.
We had Orlando, right? Yeah, Pulse nightclub shooting. But did we have a well-planned and executed Al-Qaeda level event? No. Because we had them on the ropes for 20 years. So they were so busy fighting us on that front. And their supporters were so busy fighting us on that front. And we put the fear in them that, you mess with us and we'll come and kill a lot of you. So we got a very important respite. If you imagine the level of terrorist events that we could have had extrapolated over time post 9/11, had we not done that, let your imagination run wild, and that's exactly what would have happened. And it didn't, because we were there, because we had a presence. We also made monumental leaps forward in strategy, in tactics, in techniques, in battlefield medicine, in how we wear our kit, body armor, in our vehicles, our weapons, in what we know about drones. The whole concept of on the ground reconnaissance and how we can replace it, or augment it, if nothing else, with technology. Massive leaps forward. Okay, these are all very important things, especially as we look forward and the possibility of what we call a peer or near peer conflict. These are all very important things and very valuable things. Now, my thoughts on the withdrawal as a whole are that it was botched. The plan from the previous administration, not great. If I was going to grade it, I would have probably given it a C. But there was room for improvement there, and there was room for, I guess you'd say, extra credit, because there were still a lot of open loopholes that in the way it could have been executed moving forward. So it was a C. It was a solid C. The execution of that plan and the actual changing of that plan, and the excuse of, well, we were given a plan. Well, you actually changed the plan. Okay, if we're gonna call it like it is, their execution would be they need to repeat this whole grade over. So they got a complete F, rock bottom F. And the fact that I don't care how many people we got out. I don't care if it was the most massive airlift ever. You don't get to sink a ship and then take credit for the lifeboats. It just does not work that way. So abandoning Bagram Air Base in the middle of the night, which was a strategic linchpin for the entire region, probably strategically, probably the single dumbest decision in American military history. There may have been dumber strategic military decisions in history. especially if you look at some of the blunders that the Third Reich made in World War II. But as far as blunders that we have made, that's hands down, that's the biggest. Is we should have kept Bagram. That should have been our central location. And I even talked on my podcast specifically about how that would have worked in getting people out of a city with a population of 4.5 million that has a single airstrip, and getting them 30 miles away, which is relatively easy, to a massive airfield, easily controlled, easily defended, where you could have quartered and vetted everybody before you got them out of country. So colossally stupid decision. I won't get into too much of under the bus throwing. Suffice it to say that I've met Mark Milley. I worked for him when he was 3 Corps commander at Fort Hood. I've never thought he was worth the uniform that he was wearing, and I still don't.
I saw, obviously, Tim Kennedy's been posting a lot of stuff about this, and I guess he went over there with a bunch of other
with Chad Robichaux and
Spec Ops too, and got some of those people out there. Do you still have people that you know that are over there? Not operationally, but I mean like people that you worked with when you were in Afghanistan?
No, I don't, because, and that's a lot of that has to do with the fact that I didn't go over there in the typical SF capacity. So a lot of my brethren, a lot of my fellow SF guys, they were going over there for longer deployments, like typically a minimum of say 9 months. And they were doing, the typical SF mission, which is on a day-to-day basis. They had some type of Afghani counterpart, whether that was their military counterpart or their interpreter, their TERP, as we say. And I traveled over there in my capacity with the Joint Medical Augmentation Unit. So I would move around the battle space and be attached to different Tier 1 units doing what they were doing. And I didn't show up for day one of a deployment and, hey, this is your interpreter who's going to be with you every day. I had brief interactions with several of those individuals over the course of a deployment, but I can't say that I ever built long-term relationships with any of them, because just by the nature of the way my mission worked, it just didn't lend itself to cultivating that type of relationship.
Well, I don't know how it's going to turn out. I just by watching the disaster unfold on TV in real time, I had a bad feeling that, if we're giving control of security to a terrorist group, we're just opening the door. I don't care, I think that's always been, I don't want to really go down this rabbit hole, but that's always been our issues, that we don't understand that part of the world.
We don't.
And it's like, the Taliban and ISIS-K hate each other, but you know what? They hate us more. Yeah. So if they're going to turn their back as someone goes through with a suicide vest, that's kind of, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to see that.
So there's an old saying, and I do not think it is in the Quran, but it is a well-known saying in Islamic countries, and I first heard this in the 1980s, and the saying is roughly as follows: me against my brother, me and my brother against my cousin, me and my brother and my cousin against all others. Okay, so you look at Sunni versus Shia, right? You look at that conflict. Okay, that's fine, but you give them a common enemy in the form of an infidel. Same with ISIS-K. ISIS-K, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, whoever it is, you give them a common enemy in the form of an infidel, and boom, they're on the same team. They have no problem. This is like a Marvel team up, okay, or whatever you want to call it. There's these things are going to happen, and we made ourselves the common enemy, and they'll drive us out, and then worry about whatever, like you say, whatever internal differences they have, they'll iron out later. And but definitely, the enemy of my enemy is my friend is another saying that everyone has heard, and that's certainly how they looked at it in getting us out of there. So a lot of mistakes were made. And when it comes to the enablers who are still trapped over there and the interpreters who are still trapped over there. I very much liken this. I made this comment about a year ago. I was sitting down having lunch with a former Intel officer, reserve Intel officer, and a Special Forces Master Sergeant, and I said, and we were talking about the Terps. And I think people don't realize that's completely a term of endearment when you say Terps, when we're talking about the interpreters. Because these are the guys that were on target with us. They were taking. I remember looking across and seeing it, was carrying an AK that he bought on his own, body armor he bought on his own, and he didn't like wearing a helmet, so he was wearing a New York Yankees ball cap in the middle of a firefight, And he's like, yeah, whatever. These guys are awesome, and they are what to the Vietnam generation. We had the Montagnards that we left over there, and terrible things happened to, and a lot of them ultimately relocated to North Carolina. The Terps are our Montagnards. It's they are those who are with us side by side in combat, and now they're still there, and now they are the subject of reprisal and targets for torture and public execution, and we've done them and some American citizens who are still trapped there, some American passport holders. We've done them an incredible disservice. And the August 31 deadline, complete bullshit, completely arbitrary. We didn't have to adhere to that anyway, because the Taliban had even admitted that they hadn't fulfilled their end of the bargain. But certainly once those 13 heroes' lives were taken, then all deadlines go out the window, because now there's been an attack on American forces, which was the number one thing that the President of the United States kept touting as, but there's been no attacks on America. And then it's the question, well, was it them or was it ISIS-K? Who cares? They're responsible for security, therefore the buck stops with them. They're responsible for it. At that point, guess what, guys? All deadlines are off. And if you don't like it, we'll jump a couple of Ranger battalions into Bagram, and we'll take Bagram back, and we'll get people out that way. And I know we didn't want to do that for a lot of reasons. We didn't want to send more troops in. But I think a fellow SF guy who, like me, turned physician, said to me in a Facebook message the other day, he said, and this is somebody who voted for the current president, by the way, he said, I don't know what the best way to handle this was, but we are seeing the worst way to handle it right now. He said, there's no doubt, there's zero possibility there's a worse way to do it than the way we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I never saw this coming. I predicted other things happening, with the economy and with a lot of the other progressive ideas that are being pushed about. Mm-hmm. But I never saw this happening this bad, considering how we were and how we are as a military. But real quick, because I don't want to go too long with you, and I appreciate your time. Your company is, your podcast is Mind of the Warrior, mm-hmm. but your company is Greybeard Performance.
Correct.
What does Greybeard Performance do?
Greybeard Performance it's a life and lifestyle brand for guys like you and me. So dudes over 40, still wanting to kick indoors, still wanting to kick ass, get on the mat and mix it up, and get in the ring and mix it up, or the cage and mix it up, or sling tires or sling lead or whatever it might be. You're not content to put on the polo shirt and hitch up your golf pants under your gut every weekend, and that's the extent of your exercise. Guys who are still getting after it. King Leonidas was on the battlefield at Thermopylae at age 60. I want to be like that guy. I want to be like Leonidas. I want to still keep kicking ass. I want to still be at least going up to the breach point at age 60, if not beyond. And I realized that there wasn't a lot out there for that. And again, because I'd had to kind of figure it out on my own. So I came up with Greybeard Performance, and the Greybeard Performance brand is centered around our supplement line, which is ever expanding. I have 2 SKUs now, my longevity formula, my energy formula. In the coming months, I'll be adding vitality formula and sleep formula, and eventually it's going to be 7 in the supplement line, or maybe even beyond that. But I also sell jiu-jitsu fight gear, gis, rash guards. I just started with t-shirts and hats and some other cool swag, but it's also going to be a central location that people can go to link to my podcast, to buy the book. I plan to have an ongoing blog on there. And I'm hoping to get people to kind of guest blog for me too. So to where I can, have, nutrition tips from experts, exercise tips from experts. And this will be a one-stop shop. If I could wave a magic wand and fast forward this, I would have this all on an app at everybody's fingertips, but app development costs money and I don't have that kind of money currently. So, so that's what the Greybeard Performance brand is all about. And really, right now it's the supplements, it's the gear. So it's taking care of your body and flying the flag on your back when you go to jiu-jitsu to show everybody, hey, I'm a Greybeard and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm actually proud of it.
Jiu-jitsu for life.
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu for life. Exactly.
Jiu-jitsu for life. Yeah. That's what I tell my kid. Yeah. Who's going to kick my ass soon.
That's a good feeling.
And he's only 12.
That's a good feeling, though. Yeah, when they exceed you.
His chokes are so good. I'm like, damn.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I can say, my 20-year-old, I can still just annihilate, but a lot of that has to do with body weight.
That's very cool. I'll link Greybeard Performance and your book in the show notes, and also I'm going to link that. I'm going to find that podcast episode that you did on Afghanistan, because I know a lot of people are still hurting about that, and it's still unfolding. We have no idea how this is going to play out.
We don't, and it's unfortunately. I mean, this is coming right. I don't want with psychic energy to set anything in motion, but I do have a very bad feeling about what this 9/11 could possibly have in store for us. Yeah, they love anniversaries, and now they have drones. So,
oh God, yeah. They got all these weapons.
Yeah, I'm just not real happy about that. It's
yeah, I can't imagine
9/11 anniversary, and they have drones, and we have a porous southern border. So all I'm saying is, if I lived in San Diego or Los Angeles or Southern California, I probably wouldn't be there in September. So that's the terrible feeling that I have, unfortunately.
Well, we wish you a lot of luck on the book, on the release. What's coming up for you? Anything in particular?
Nothing in particular, just still pushing the book. I appreciate the reception that it's gotten. To those out there who have bought it or are going to buy it, please, please, please write me a good Amazon review. The reviews are extremely helpful, and I do read every single one of them, even the negative ones. So far, there's only one, and I think that guy wanted me to do his burpees for him. But I do read all the reviews, and I incorporate all of that. So, if there's an updated version or a follow-up version in the future, everything you say will be taken into account, and I appreciate it. And it also, helps me get the word out, because the more people that see that book on the bestseller list, that see the 5-star reviews, they're more likely to buy that book. And this isn't just about business for me. This is about spreading a message. And, 50 is the new 30. And I want people to realize that. I want to see more guys like you and me that are kicking ass up to the 7th decade and just, thumbing their nose at conventionality.
Awesome. Best way for people to get in touch with you? They want to hear more about what you got going on?
Greybeardperformance.com, of course, is the website, my business website. drmikesimpson.com is still an open website, although I don't do as much there anymore. You can follow me on social media. Greybeard Performance has its own Instagram account and its own Facebook page. And then also I try to interact with people as much as possible on my Dr. Mike Simpson Instagram account.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on the Finalization podcast.
Thank you for having me, man. Really appreciate it.